It's what to pay attention to when you are growing and scaling your business. And we have a special guest here today. I'm really excited to welcome Michael Forman. Michael has been working with professionals for nearly a decade. He's delivered many presentations. He's an author of a great book called Networking Unleashed, and he's passionate about helping professionals prepare for a successful and financially rewarding career. He loves speaking. He's also a father and husband. Welcome, Michael. I'm so glad to have you here. And I'm just when I looked at your bio, it says that book has been written up in many articles. And from what I'm gathering, you're doing a lot of speaking. You're traveling the world. You're traveling the country. You're also a distinguished veteran of Desert Storm. So when we're looking at, everything that you're bringing to the table, how did you get to traveling the country, speaking and talking about networking?
Well, it it really goes far back, like when I was in the Air Force, but and I was a young 20 something, but I learned how to speak to people that were older than I was that I outranked.
Mm,
So I had to
that's
talk to
that's a
them.
great skill to have.
Well, I had to talk to them in a certain way, otherwise they would get upset. And after the Air Force, I went to my own businesses. I owned a graphic design studio, a pizzeria, a restaurant. So I learned how to speak with people many different ways. I spoke to my employees one way, and I spoke to my customers another way. Not bad in any of the ways, but just
Right.
differently. So
Different
that taught
communication.
me how to how to properly speak to them. And then I moved down to Georgia, and well, I went to the mortgage business for about 10 or 12 years, and that was a thing by itself. But then I moved down to Georgia, and the pandemic hit,
Oh boy.
and really, people lost their minds because they forgot how to speak with one another. They forgot how to network. They think that everything is cell phones and Zoom and everything else like that.
Emails.
Email. But they forgot how to talk with people. They
Yep.
forgot how to communicate. They forgot how to, when you walk into a room, you pick up a vibe of the room, and you pick up a vibe from the person that you're speaking to. And all of that all comes together. And if you don't speak with somebody the right way, the other person will probably dismiss you
Yep.
and go on
Good
their,
point.
their way.
Good point. And look, I mean, one of the reasons I was really excited when we had this opportunity to have Michael here today is because when we're thinking about our audience, right? Our audience, small business owners who are generally at the edge of their bandwidth, they're handling so much of the day-to-day still. They're trying to get their teams up to speed, but there's still some holes, some gaps, so they end up kind of getting sucked into the grind a lot and they're pretty exhausted. Um, and for many of them, the idea of networking is like the last thing on the to-do list. They all know they need to do it, right? And every time we talk about opportunities, every time we talk about expansion, that's like one of the biggest bottlenecks a lot of times because like, hey, I've stayed in my comfort zone. I've been in my area where I know everybody and that's going great. But when we talk about pushing the needle and getting the numbers to really exponentially flow, not having made those connections, not having built those relationships becomes a really, really obvious problem at that point. So I'm excited for you to talk to our audience a little bit about how do you make that process easier? How do you make it more fun? How do you make it more exciting to actually do? Because we all know if it's something at the end of your to-do list that you just make yourself do, well, for one thing, it's not fun. And for another, it's not going to yield the results that you're hoping for because to really make a connection, to really make a relationship, there has to be a lot of interest and joy and inspiration in that. So, um,
You
tell
hit the
us a little
nail right
bit.
on the head. You did. by saying that it wasn't fun, it wasn't exciting. And if you're a small businessman person, you really have to figure that, okay, you have maybe one or two salespeople, maybe you have five, but you at the helm, you don't have the time nor the desire to go out and network when you should really turn that around. When I was in the mortgage business, I went to a networking event and I came home with a shoebox full of business cards. And I
It
said,
sounds
look how
familiar.
great I did. And then 2 weeks later, I'm going through the business cards. I'm going, who was this? I don't remember this person. So
Yeah.
one
And
thing you have
how
to
often had you followed up by then?
yeah, that's right. That's right. Waiting and all of that taught me what I talk about today. Okay, because I've done it wrong. I've done it the wrong way. I've got no results. I went to the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did everything wrong so that my clients don't have to. All right. So it's really simple. But in a 3 or 4 hour event, networking event, you shouldn't come away with more than 15 or 20 business cards because that will set you up properly saying, okay, you spent enough time with this person, you know enough about them, about their business and how they do their business. You had some interaction, and of course, you got their business card. Now, what do you do with that business card after you receive it? It's simple. Write
You
down
put
the
it in
date.
a you put it
Yeah,
in a shoebox. That's what you do.
put it in the shoebox and forget about it.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
write down a date, write down the name of the function, and write down something you spoke about because that will jog your memory of how to respond to them during your follow up. And you do that 15 or 20 times. And really, by the end of the evening, you will have talked twice as much than if you got a box full of cards.
Yeah.
You had it was much there was much more meaning. There was much more to the conversations. Then, of course, there's the follow up.
Well,
And
so
if
let's
you
let's
don't,
make a mental
yeah,
note for our listeners here, right? Because the really most important thing that you've said so far, that's going to be the most important thing for the entire conversation. I'm sure there's other stuff too, but it's like, hey, it's quantity over quality, right? It's not about talking to
absolutely.
everybody in the room.
Well,
It's
here,
about making sure that you have meaningful conversations.
let me go one better.
Sure.
Let's say you go to a networking event, you walk up to a table, there's 4 or 5 people there. What's the first thing that you do? Nothing. You don't speak, you listen. You listen for the conversation. Is this a conversation that I want to be a part of? If it
Mhm.
is, great, you stay. If it's not, you politely bow out and you go to another table. But let's say it is.
That alone, if I can interrupt you there, because that's like, if I had known that when I did a lot of networking, I probably would have had a much easier time because that's always that most awkward moment of like, okay, I'm all by myself here. These people are talking. Am I going to interrupt them? How do I even approach this? How do I get into this conversation? So listen and observe. I love that.
Absolutely. And when the conversation comes around to you, you should really already have something in your head that you're going to say something about. Now remember, you're going out as the expert in your field. So what you say should follow along those lines. But let's
Right.
say you come out with something very smart and two of the people responded to what you said. So you kind of guide to those two people and you listen to them because listening is more important than anything else. And more important is the pause. You pause after you listen. And what does that do? That tells the other person that you were listening to them, that you're not trying to think of something else that you want to say, but you're there to respond to what they say.
Yeah.
So I have something called FORM, FORM,
Hmm.
family, occupation, recreation, and a message you can get onto the same level. And always think in the back of your head the mantra of networking. They have to know you, like you, and trust you. Then they will do business with you. So you're there listening to them. Ask them about their family, about their husband, wife, daughter. Is their son in Little League? Whatever, and have them talk. Because what is that doing? When they're speaking about themselves, about their family, about what they do, whatever. But they are raising your level of trust and they're breaking down that wall. And then here's a kicker: say, you know what? I like you. I like what you do. I like how you do it. How can I make you more successful? How can I be a great referral source for you? That usually blows them away. But after he tells you, he gives you the card, you write down the information, then you may tell them what you do and everything else. But that probably took 10, 15 minutes. If there was another person at the table, you do the same thing to them. So that's why that whole time, it's a half an hour, all you did was walk away with two business cards.
Yeah. Well, what I love that you were emphasizing, Michael, is still kind of at the beginning where you said, you come up to the table and you listen for the conversation, and that gives you the power to either come into the conversation or bow out if it's not applicable, right? And I think that's and I'm not one to go to like small networking events or something like that, but I have gone to a lot of conferences in my time. Same idea, right? So you're in a room of high level people. You don't want to sound like a moron, right? So you're trying to think of things
Sure.
that establish you as the expert, all that kind of good stuff, which is great. But it goes back to listening skills and then knowing how to speak to somebody at the level where it actually it's meaningful to them.
Exactly. And that's where form comes in. If they're comfortable talking about their family, that's great. Their occupation, well, that's great. They like to ski, they like to play baseball, football, they like to watch football, you know, and then just something to get onto the same level. Once you find that level that they're on, then you stay there and you have a nice conversation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I think that's also where a lot of people have trouble, is to really understand when it's appropriate to start talking business. So I just got back from this conference that I go to every year in Aspen. It's a bunch of high level people who show up, generally the same people. So you actually start building real relationships with people. You see them year after year. And the really interesting thing about that conference to me is it's in Aspen. So really the main focus of the conference is you go skiing during the day, and then there's a short session in the late afternoon, and then people go out to dinners and do all sorts of stuff. But it's 100% geared towards get to know the people. And many of those conversations will have absolutely nothing to do with business. It's all about get to actually know this person. So before you open your mouth and talk about what you do, you can actually speak to what might actually be useful to them.
Know
And
you, like you, trust you. They'll do
yeah,
business with you.
yeah, I love that. I think that's really important to keep in mind because far too often we think about, oh my God, what should I say? How am I gonna make them listen? Do I make them hear? Right? It's the key of relationships is that piece right there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So look, I mean, I'm curious, for some people, networking is something that's easy, that's natural, that they love to do. And for some people, it's nails on a chalkboard. So what can you tell our audience here in terms of how to actually approach this so this is actually fun and enjoyable versus just this thing that you have to do that you would rather not?
That's the number one question that I'm asked when I'm doing a workshop for a company or on a stage when I'm speaking to them. what a breakout session. Oh, it always comes up. Listen, what I'm talking about is about extroverts. The hand always goes up and says, well, I'm really an introvert. What do you have for me?
Hmm.
I say, it's the same thing. Only now, whenever you go to a networking event or a networking meeting or a get together, you always go alone. That's a number one rule. You go
Mm.
alone. But
So you don't
if
have
you're
your
an
wing
in,
person who
you
can,
don't,
who can
but I was
distract
just
you.
going to say that because an introvert, you bring a wingman. Now, I'm an Air Force guy, so I always say wingman.
Mhm.
So what you do, let's say you approach the table. Now there's two of you and you're listening for the conversation. Now, the person who you bring has to know you, has to know your job, has to know you well enough where you can intervene. But when the conversation rolls around, that person will say, you know something, that's very interesting. Simone, what do you have to say about that? And then that's your introduction to now, because you just sit there and you're going to wait for the conversation to come around. But if somebody introduces you and asks you a question, oh, you'll be more than happy to talk about it. So
That's
that's the thing.
that's a nice
Now, with
one.
the
I
two
like that.
people, when they ask you a question, that wingman is there kind of as a guide, and to say, I like what you're doing. I know what you do, but you have to say it. But your wingman will set you up. And listen, you're not going to get better the first time out. Okay. You're not even going to get better the second time out. But the third, fourth, or fifth time, it'll become easier.
But
And
it's
you
like, you mean to
probably,
tell me that we have to keep doing this? This is something that is part of a business practice.
exactly.
Okay.
Listen, I always say networking should be on your schedule.
Yeah,
You should
that's a
put,
good one.
especially if you're a small business. There's 1,000 networking meetings. It doesn't have to just be a conference. Especially if you're an introvert or if you don't have the time, start out small. Start out small. Go to a chamber of commerce and go to their meetings every week. Then there's an after hours meeting. And all of a sudden you see that that's a good way. And it's becoming easier and easier to get ahead, to find.
Yep. I think we had a little internet wobble here. But what you're saying here, that a lot of our customers need to hear is something that it doesn't necessarily come natural to everybody, right? This is something that you need to actually learn, you need to practice it, you need to get comfortable with it. I love your idea of bringing a wing person because that is a great setup. So then you don't have to toot your own horn. You can talk about it from a perspective of, I'm just coming into the conversation. Somebody asked me my opinion. That's much, much easier. So I love that perspective. And when you think about, like, especially as an introvert, like, one thing that I'd always been told is like, keep, like, practice some things before you even go into the situation. Have some small talk prepared, right? Have something prepared that you can
Well,
talk about.
I always say practice, practice, practice. You may have a little bit of a talent, but you need to practice. You need to get in with somebody else and just practice talking. Now, on one, you're great for talking, but in front of 5 people, 10 people, all of a sudden it's closing in on you. And yes, you can practice certain items, but it's not as good as impromptu. Okay. So if you have 5 or 10 people, have somebody with you, or if you want to practice, have them ask you questions, different questions, and how you
Okay, yeah.
respond. You say, oh, no, 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 I should have responded that way. I should respond this way. And then have them ask you again and again and again, like 10, 15 questions. So instead of, looking at different cards,
Yeah.
putting the cards away and you're just reacting.
Yeah. I love it. And I think the art of conversation is always about ask more questions than do the talking, right? That's kind of the, especially if you're feeling insecure and nervous, sometimes it's easy to just come out with a wall of words and
Yeah,
drown the people instead
exactly.
of just doing what's much easier, asking questions and sitting back and letting other people talk. And, everybody loves to talk, well, especially us extroverts, right? So you can get them talking. They feel great about themselves. They feel like you really care and you listen and you are their biggest, newest fan. So, okay. So, is there anything else that you'd say is important to that you can give in terms of guidance? Like we have this conversation, everybody wrote their notes down on the business cards. Now what?
Yeah, that now I have the secret sauce. The
Okay.
secret sauce
Give
to
us the
networking.
sauce.
Okay. It's the follow up, because
Oh,
if you don't follow up correctly, you might as well not even have gotten the cards in the first place.
right.
When I went to my last network, or maybe the time before last, somebody came up to me and said, Mike, how how do you follow up? I said, well, how do you follow up? Well, I wait till the next afternoon. And I send him an email. Then I wait 3 or 4 days and I send him another email. I said, okay, you do that, because if you're going in competition with me, you lost,
Mm.
because that is not the right way. Now, in a nutshell, my secret sauce for a follow up: when you get back to the office or your house, write them a thank you email. Hi, Simone, this is Mike. I met you tonight. We talked about this. Thank you very much for meeting me and giving me your time, Michael.
So
Done.
you would do that the same evening.
The same evening.
Mm.
Now, the next morning, here it is. I have a briefcase full of thank you cards. I write a handwritten thank you card.
Who's done that?
Ah,
What's the
that's
last
see,
time you got one of those, right?
that's right. Now there is a website that you can. I think it's handywritten.com. You
Mm.
can type it all out, and they'll send it out for you. So you can it's kind of like halfway. But you write down, hey, Simone, this is Mike. I met you on such and such date at such and such an affair. We spoke about your husband or your son. He played Little League. Hope everything is well, Michael. Wow.
Handywritten.com. That
Yes,
might that is like the secret sauce to how to get over actually having to write on a piece of paper and go to the post office, which is it's the
exactly.
hardest thing to do.
But now, that first email, you have about a 20% chance of them responding to you.
Mhm.
That's it. Now, after that thank you note, you just raise that to about 50%. 3 or 4 days later, if you still have not gotten a response, now a response is either a positive or negative. Either, hey, Michael, it was great speaking with you, but I'm not interested, whatever, as long as it's a response.
Right.
But let's say you didn't get anything. So at the end of the 4 days, but giving them time to receive your thank you card, write them an email and say, hey, Simone, this is Michael. I met you on such and such date at such and such a fair. We spoke about your son playing Little League. I believe it was first base. Listen, I'm looking at my schedule for next week. Tuesday and Wednesday seem to be clear. How about one of those days, Michael? And then you wait for a response. Now, if within a day and a half or 2 days maximum, you still don't get a response, you write another email. Say, hey, Simone, this is Mike. This is Michael. I met you on such and such date, such and such affair. Now, notice I'm always putting the date in. I'm
Mm.
always putting the affair in, okay, because it will keep you in mind. Listen, I told you Tuesday and Wednesday were open. Tuesday seemed to have closed up. How's Wednesday at 3 o'clock?
Smart. I like that.
And you sign it. Now, I raised it to about 75%. If you told anybody in business they have a 75% chance of getting a response, they would jump at it because average response is 20%.
Yeah.
So bring that up to right now. I don't say throw the information away if you haven't got a response yet. Try one last stitch 2 or 3 days later. Hey, Simone, this is Michael. I met you on such and such date, such affair. We spoke about your son. I see Tuesday and Wednesday have closed up for me. Listen, if you want to get together anytime soon, please let me know, Michael, because that just left it open-ended, but left you in charge.
Right.
Now, what do you do with that
So
information?
let me summarize this for a second because this is, I think this part is the hardest for people. It's like, how often do I follow up so I'm not a pain, right? So I don't make myself an annoyance. But then at the same time, I mean, how many times do I have people reach out to me and I'm like, oh yeah, they're great. I would love to talk to them, but I can't focus on that right now, right? So it has absolutely nothing to do with the person, but it's everything to do with how crazy my life is. So you send the first email right away, then you do the card the next morning, then you do two follow-ups with time slots that you offer, and then one that says, hey, I don't have any more time slots, but I'd still love to talk to you. Did I get that?
Yeah, and
Perfect.
all of that is over about a 2 week period. Okay. And so, listen, I understand that you're in business, you don't have time, but over 2 weeks, you have time to at least answer the email. Okay. Maybe you're on vacation, maybe you were doing something, whatever for a week. But that following week, you can respond.
Yeah. Now, this is great. This gives everybody a nice sequence. And also, hearing it from you, you've done this obviously for a long time. You've talked to a lot of people. Having a structure to it, I think is much, much easier for people than to just kind of go, oh, you go. And yes, of course, you should follow up, but how many times do you follow up? How often do you do it? And a lot of times, I think that is what keeps people from following up altogether. So this is
Well,
great to have.
it's true. If you have a CRM, first of all, if you don't have a CRM,
Get
get
one.
one. Okay. So if you have a CRM, then you have all the information from your business card. So put all the information in your CRM plus the date, the affair, and what you spoke about. And put them on some sort of a drip campaign so that they at least know that you're still alive. Once a month, send them an email, whatever's happening. I about 3 weeks ago, I received an email back from an event planner that I sent an email out to 8 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And she emailed me like no time had passed. Hey, Michael, this is great. Listen, I have a conference coming up. Maybe you are a good fit. Da 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 da.
Wow.
And it's like no time has passed at all. But that's because every month I put her on a drip campaign.
Yeah.
So I kept my name in front of her.
So this is so good to hear and get clear about for our audience, Michael, because a lot of the things that you said is why our people don't do it. Because one thing here is this takes time. Let's make no bones about it. This takes time, and there's really no not doing it. So one thing you said earlier is like put it on your schedule. So there's the event to go to, but that's only the beginning. Then we have a whole little follow-up sequence of what needs to happen to actually make that time worth it. Because if you're going to spend, you know, your whole evening, like you're going to drive to the place, you're going to be there, you're going to talk to people, you're going to put yourself out there, and then you drive back. Well, that was a lot of effort put in. But the most important part is like if you don't do this last part, well, you might as well have saved yourself the time and watch some Netflix at night or something. So
One thing you always remember when you go to a networking event, don't think you're going to make a sale. Don't think, don't, you're not going to get anything out of the event. You're only going to give. You're only going
right.
to give, not receive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Is there, I mean, I think we covered really like all the different steps here that are to get to a successful event where you have a follow-up sequence, you actually make your time worth it. Is there anything else that we should add for our listeners to like what to pay attention to here? What are some
Well,
anything
just
else?
that you have an outline of what to do before you meet somebody, what to do while you're speaking with that person, and what to do as your follow-up. Those three parts, if you do it all correctly, and I'm not saying my way is perfect, and I'm not saying my way is the only way, but my way, like I said, I went to the school of hard knocks. I
Yeah,
went, and so I learned that this seems to be, and this way has worked for me for years.
yeah.
So,
And
and I
look,
keep,
I love how you broke this down very simply, because I think the reason for why so many people don't go and don't do this is something that can make the difference between being able to expand in your business when you want to and not. So this it's one of the most important things that every business owner needs to do. It's not should, it's like you must, right? It's not about should. And it's something that a lot of people would rather avoid. So having a clear structure for it, breaking it down into simple steps, I hope makes it a ton easier for everybody, because now you know it's like, okay, maybe fewer events, but being really intentional about it and really structured about it actually gives you a whole lot more outcome, is what I'm hearing right now. And that might make it a lot easier for our business owners to actually schedule it out, take out the time and do it.
if
And
you
doing it, I think
do,
is the biggest thing.
if you do what we had just discussed, your next networking event, I can almost guarantee it. I can't guarantee it, but I can almost guarantee that you'll do more business next month than you did this month.
Yeah,
You'll
I
immediately
love it.
increase your profits.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This was awesome. You gave us a tremendous amount of value. For anybody who would like to learn more, connect with Michael, you can go to his website, michaelaforman.com. And that's Foreman without an E. And he said there's a just said there's a PDF on the website you can download for the book, and there's also lots more information, anything that you might need. So go check that out. Networking Unleashed, Mastering the Art of Networking. Everybody should have that in their library, not just on the shelf, but actually read it and practice it. I'm going to
A
say there.
small book and easy to read, but it'll guide you right through it.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes as well, so they're accessible for everybody. But thank you so much, Michael. I really enjoyed having you here. And we'll speak
You're
to
most,
you another time.
yeah, you're most welcome, and it's great that I'm able to share my experience with your viewers to hopefully get them more profits.
Love it. Well, thank you so much.